So I'm going to share my screen here, and thank you for the invitation to be with you today. I wish I was with you up in Flagstaff face to face, but we are all in this virtual world, and travel is as well in many places. So I'm going to talk about travel too in the midst of COVID. So I'm going to have a number of comments related to that. But a lot of these same principles apply whether you're going somewhere, person living with dementia and their care partner, or whether people are coming to you to visit. And in fact, as I wrote the book on Travel Well, the strategies apply just as much whether you're going or people are coming to see you. So we're going to talk about dementia as a hidden disability because it is not recognized as a disability by the travel industry, which is so fascinating given how they have embraced autism, another cognitive neurological kind of condition. And then we'll talk about some of the barriers in travel related to dementia, as well as I'm going to share some precautionary measures and how care partners can assist the person living with dementia to be able to be more successful to follow these measures. We'll talk about some strategies that will really help arm caregivers to be more successful in planning and executing travel. And then I'm going to talk about what is our role, and I should say both healthcare and social service professionals as we think about guiding people in travel and travel planning. And this is a really interesting area and a growing area. Through my book, I've joined a group called the International Society of Travel Medicine, and there's a group just for travel health nurses, and all of this really seeks to inform how many people travel and really need the input of educated health and social service providers who can really guide them for safe and effective travel. So I'm just going to say that, Americans love to travel. We spend a lot of our GDP on travel. And in fact, this is one of the areas really hurting as a result of COVID, as we all know. But the reason we travel, and I will tell you, older adults travel, about a third of the travel market is people over 65. And that's because not only do these individuals have the time, but they often have dispendable income that they can use for travel. But a good part of travel for all Americans really is based on staying connected to family and friends, whether that just be for holiday visits or, an annual visit. But a lot of it is also taking part in celebrations, whether it be a wedding, a graduation, a baptism, whatever that might be. It is a favorite form of recreation, relaxation, and many older adults love to travel because it's a source of learning. But it's also really good for our health, as it turns out. And in my many years, I've now spent about 30 of my 42 years in the nursing profession, working specifically with people living with dementia and their care partners. And in my role at Banner Alzheimer's Institute, where we did diagnosis of a lot of people with Alzheimer's, other related dementias, and we would meet with them to talk to them about what's important to you now. I have to say 90% of the time, travel came up as a primary goal that individuals had, whether it was that they were longing to go to a place that they had always dreamed about and they put it off, or whether it was about connecting with family members, why they still had the capacity to know them and really have connections. Travel always topped one of those issues, one of those reasons. And actually that was the fuel for writing my book, is because without good counsel and strategies, travel was often a disaster, which was really, really unfortunate. And then it would end altogether. So the question is, and in fact, when I was writing this book, it was amazing how many colleagues said to me, well, Janet, really, do people with dementia really travel? They don't travel. Well, first of all, there's no good data. It's mainly anecdotal, but in fact, there was a study done in Australia, and you can see it was a relatively small study of just 83 participants, but it turns out that in fact, we learned that many of these folks do visit family and friends, and they attend celebrations, just like I said, or they had that dream about trip. But when they look specifically at people living with dementia and care partners, they found that on average, most of them are taking about 2 trips per year. And then that they found that many people living with dementia are traveling alone. And, that's no surprise to me as I think about the fact that only 50% of people living with dementia will ever be told they have the condition. So there's a lack of diagnosis. And there's a lack of family knowledge and understanding. And I don't care how educated the family is, often they just don't get it or don't see that there's a problem until something happens. What we know from the same survey is that the security process is considered the most stressful part of airline travel. And that was the gist of the study, is looking at trips around airports. And I'll delve into that a bit more. But the reality is we hear a lot of stories about travel that are absolutely disastrous. So the top headline was about a woman who was a very educated woman living in San Diego. And she got up in the middle of the night, got out of the house, and wouldn't you know, she crossed into Tijuana, of all places. Then we have a couple stories that are listed, and these are just headlines that you can find, on Google, but I read them frequently, where the person is in the airport wandering around, and they're lucky if somebody from security catches them. But we found people who have walked right past the signs with their names on when they're there to greet them, perhaps a driver or something, walk right past out the airport doors, proceed to get lost, and are found dead. So it can be disastrous. And these are the most probably outrageous things that happen. But again, without proper planning and recognition that these folks are traveling, things can really become quite challenging. And as I said, dementia is a hidden disability. The reality is, when we see somebody with a guide dog, with a wheelchair, with a walker, somebody who is using sign language, right away, it's very visible to us that this is a person who has a disability. But the reality is you can't see dementia as a disability, and especially when they look normal and they sound normal. And on top of that, often there's this stigma about dementia that many people don't want to disclose that they have the condition, nor do their family members, because they know they're going to be treated differently almost immediately. And I can tell you, I've been working now with the travel industry, and their stigma around this disorder is quite significant in terms of what they think. So, for example, I met with a disability coordinator for one of the major cruise lines. This was pre-COVID, and said, I think it's really great you have, autism friendly ships and you have all these programs that help me understand why we can't see the same kind of programming for people living with dementia. And the response was, well, these people, they can become aggressive. They can be very argumentative. They're very difficult. And what he was reporting with people who are clearly having difficulty on these overwhelming ships with often way too much input. So again, the stigma that he had about what it means to live with a diagnosis of dementia created this sense of inability to participate. And often these people are invisible to our culture, where we don't want to even think about dementia. So again, many people, they hear the word dementia and they think you're in a wheelchair and you're drooling, that you're a person who is living in a residential setting. And many of those folks will travel still. So they're excluded and they're dismissed. And within this whole area, this is a whole separate talk, but I'll tell you, there is quite an uprising amongst people living with dementia who say their human rights are being violated. And I would agree, when we are not providing them the level of accommodation that we provide other people with disabilities. In fact, we are violating their human rights. This is not just a problem in the US, it's a global problem that we lack awareness and understanding about people living with dementia and their care partners. And so subsequently, we have uninformed public, which is why we're trying to do this Dementia Friends program. And I know we have a contingency of folks in Northern Arizona that are trying to do this. We have uninformed travel vendors, lots of them. And it's really easy to just dismiss these folks altogether. So we do know that there are some inherent challenges that become because of living with a cognitive disorder. Now, not every disorder leads to memory loss immediately. Certainly Alzheimer's does. So especially short-term memory can be a problem. So for example, getting separated from family while traveling can lead to some significant issues. This rapidly forgetting information, along with the ability to manage these visual spatial relationships. There can be a lost sense of time, so people might wander off to a gift shop and miss something altogether. It becomes much more challenging to plan and execute activities that require a lot of thoughts, and certainly reasoning and judgment can become impaired. So the person who really shouldn't be driving drives anyways because they believe they still have the capacity to do it. We know that attention and concentration, that is very much needed for all of us. Particularly think about going into an airport and checking in and then finding your gate and making your way through security and attending to all of your baggage, going through security and making sure you put your driver's license back in. All of that can be impaired, and subsequently we have a lot of people lose things in the midst of their travel. And so this is just very challenging. And now we live in an era where people are a little bit out there. It is that they're likely not to consider the needs of others and can be impatient and often appear to be rude. And so these are just some ideas that help us understand that there's some conditions in which travel even becomes more challenging for these folks. So the reality is we all fatigue when we're traveling, because it calls upon us to be much more aware of all of this happening. And the reality is people living with dementia fatigue far easier because it takes so much more energy and attention just to be present. And so with oncoming fatigue, which those of you who work in the peaks, this, we call it sundowning, often in these residential settings, that these folks can become more confused. We often see them behaviorally become a little more irritable, speaking out of tune or turn, demanding to leave where they're at. We know that travel creates change, and even people coming to visit will create change within the home because often the routine changes a bit. And people lose just this same ability to plan and sequence activities the way they used to. So when we're changing their environment and the way in which they cope, they really struggle with that. And we can see some fear and anger and growing anxiety and demands to go back home. We know that with progressive dementias that people can misperceive the sensory input that they're getting. And so we know that large groups can become overwhelming, that unfamiliar noises can startle individuals, that shadows that are being cast in different times of the day will lead to people often misperceiving what they're seeing, in the sense that perhaps they're hallucinating when in fact there's misinterpretation. And so this can lead to, again, fearfulness. They can become angry, they could withdraw, they could wander. People could think that all of a sudden they're hallucinating when they're in fact misperceiving their environment. Often during travel, they're going to want to do activities that have become restricted to them. So for example, the person insists on driving when we're taking a road trip, or insists on taking part of some sort of activity that we know is no longer safe for them. So they might refuse to participate altogether, maybe in a travel group that they're with. And oftentimes people are choosing, and this is kind of the pre-COVID, we think about group travel, they might be selecting itineraries or maybe partners who just aren't what I call dementia friendly. They don't get it. They don't understand what's going on with this person. And because there's all these demands being made on this person, often they become quite irritable, and things just don't go well. And I'll tell you, that's a lot of what I see with travel or visits with families, is that they're so ill-informed that they have these expectations for a person to behave or respond in a way that now is very different. And that's what makes it often very challenging. Well, since March of this year, COVID came into our world, and we continue to be in a level 3 non-essential travel warning by the CDC. And in particular, they were focused on not only older adults, which, the bulk of people living with dementia are older, but people with chronic and serious health conditions. And of course, dementia is one of those. And so, of course, there's been all these precautionary measures that have been put into place. And yet, people who are having trouble with memory and thinking often find it difficult to not only understand why the heck do we have to put a face mask on, but knowing how to follow through with it. And so we can see a lot of frustration from these individuals or their care partners when it comes to, telling them they need to wash their hands more frequently, coughing into a tissue or a sleeve, wearing a face mask, or social distancing. And so, I've crafted a number of strategies that are actually on my website that really teach and guide caregivers on how to do this. So I just did this similar talk today for a group of caregivers on a virtual meeting. And one of the questions was, well, what do I do if he won't wash his hands long enough? And so here was my suggestion, wash your hands together. And when you're at the sink, first of all, take a breath so you're not irritable, and say to them, hey, I heard that we should sing happy birthday while we wash our hands, and then we know we've washed our hands good enough. But don't start arguing if he won't participate, or this is where you have hand sanitizer and you say, here, let me put something in your hand. Well, as soon as it's wet, he's going to want to rub his hands together. So how do you do these things together? Likewise, this wearing of a face mask, it doesn't do a lot of good to try to explain a reason to someone to wear a face mask. Rather, it's just much easier to say, look, we all have to wear masks going into the store. Here's mine, and let them watch you put your mask on. Or let's put them on together. The social distancing thing is, I find, just somewhat ironic in terms of the 6 feet. Look, normal people without dementia can't social distance. So of course it's going to be more challenging for the person living with dementia. And so we do things like, just take their hand or touch their arm that indicates, here, stay with me, or point out often the markers that are on the floor, whether it be an X or say 6 feet apart, to say we're going to stand here until the line moves. But sometimes the person just can't even follow the instructions. And it's not that they're being belligerent, it's just that they don't get it. So it becomes incredibly important that we instruct caregivers, care partners, not to start arguing this person, not to reprimand them, but simply understand if they can't follow these precautionary measures, then we're going to have to really think about essential travel even outside of our house. If they can't wear a mask into a grocery store, then it's time for us to start ordering and having the groceries delivered to our home. So these become as important as we're thinking about living within our own communities, let alone if we're going to step onto an airplane. So the question often becomes, well, is it really possible for people with dementia to travel? And I say, yes, absolutely, but it just requires a lot of careful planning. We've got to create realistic expectations for everybody that's involved. We've got to maintain flexibility and always have a plan B, C, D. And I will tell you, quite honestly, the best travel that any of us do, even without a cognitive disorder, really is the same thing. The best trips are often very carefully planned. We have to stay flexible because we never know when weather happens or a flight is canceled, or maybe a Broadway show we wanted to go to during better times, that something happened. So we always have to put these kinds of things in place for really good travel. So I'm going to walk through these 10 tips for traveling well. And my book is really written in this way that it's kind of 10 tips for booking a flight, 10 tips for managing your time on the airline, 10 tips for considering group travel, 10 tips for when your family come and visit you. So the first one becomes to identify the purpose of the trip. And right now, kind of realistically thinking, where are we going or who's coming to see us? So let's factor in now all of the COVID stuff that's taking place, So let's say we wanted to travel to North Dakota. So that would be a state right now I wouldn't touch, I wouldn't go into, because they're at 100% capacity. If I'm a person living with dementia or I've got an autoimmune system, I would not be entering a state whose healthcare system does not have capacity to treat me, let alone high risk of exposure. Or let's say the family wanted to come here to Arizona, and by the way, they're bringing college-age students, or the kids, young kids who are going to public school, and son and daughter-in-law are both working out of the home. They bring a higher degree of exposure. Those are the kinds of things right now we're also thinking through. So we've got to think, where are we going? Why are we doing this? And then where are we going to be staying, or where are the people who are coming to visit us, will they be staying? We have to be very clear about that, because in the past, while we might have enjoyed guests in our home, now this person living with dementia is easily overwhelmed and frustrated. And so bringing in the kids and the grandkids can add far more stress and noise that you just know isn't going to work. So how are you going to communicate that? How long is the trip going to be, and how long can your person stand to be away from home? And what are you going to need to make the trip successful? What are those who are accompanying you going to need to know, or people who are going to come and see you? What is it they need to know? And what are you going to do if there's an emergency? And right now, in the midst of COVID, I think that's a real significant one for people who are at greater risk for travel. What will you do? Where will you go to get your care? And so we need to take an honest appraisal of what the situation is going to be. And we need to consider how the person will do, how the caregiver will do, and I'm going to add family and friends as well as another consideration. So with the person living with dementia, do they even want to go? Would they even recognize these people? Again, if they're in the moderate stage of dementia, and they're forgetting the grandchildren, perhaps and the great grandchildren, is it going to add more stress when they're emphatically saying, I don't want to go? Or can they handle the demands of travel? So let's say you're not going to take a flight, but rather you're going to take a road trip. Will they be able to handle 2 days on the road to get to where you want to go to? Because you can't make this trip in the car from Phoenix to Denver in a single day any longer. 12 hours is too much. And are their symptoms managed at home? So if they're confused a good part of the day, they want to go home when they are home, they don't even recognize their home, they're prone to wandering, or they get easily frustrated or agitated. These are folks who are not going to travel well. And likewise, if their health issues just aren't well controlled, travel should not be considered. As we think about the caregiver, we often have to understand what's their temperament. How can they handle the stress of travel? And do you find that they're easily upset even at home and they can't handle, a crisis? Well, how are they going to do when all of a sudden there's a crisis during travel, that a flight gets canceled or whatever that might be? Or the person who is so embarrassed about their person's behavior and wants to correct them and argue with them. That's just not going to be an ideal situation. Or that person who has to be so honest with the person and just tell them everything, because after all, I've never lied to him. We took a vow. Well, that's probably not going to work very well either. This is a person, if they're not open to getting assistance, and they just don't want to adapt, travel is going to be very, very difficult. Likewise, if they've got their own health issues, they really need to be aware of that. I'll tell you, it's really important as we think about family and friends, and it's not on this slide, but just think of it from a perception of even them coming to visit or joining in on a holiday. Are they aware of the person's condition now? Do they get it? Because in my experience, many spousal caregivers are quite reluctant to share with their adult children what the situation is. They feel like if this is something we just keep behind us or between us, I don't want to burden the children, and the children really have no idea or have unrealistic expectations. Or we have children who only make a weekly call, if even that. And they think that the well spouse is just making way too much of this. So open and honest communication with that family becomes so important to make sure that they get where this person is in their condition. Again, are they willing to be flexible? Are they willing to help with the kind of assistance that's needed? And do they have reasonable expectations about what this visit might be? So you might have, adult children, grandchildren traveling from out east to enjoy the beautiful weather here, at least in the Phoenix area over Thanksgiving. And they've got all these plans to do X, Y, Z. And they think that, we're going to just put grandma on the treadmill, and they don't understand why she's melting down. Or they wonder, why is dad being so resistant to trying to do these things as a family, because they really aren't aware of the situation. So these become really important factors as we think about travel or visits with family and friends. So as I said, from this Australian study, many older adults living with dementia, or people with dementia, are traveling alone. And the question is, should they be traveling alone? And I think, well, it depends. If they're early in their disease process or they have mild cognitive impairment, they probably could travel alone. But here become the questions to answer. Can they follow instructions? Can they really follow through on that? And remember, attention and concentration becomes really important when you get into a highly busy place like an airport. Think about how distracting that can be. Can they wayfind independently? I think many people struggle to wayfind without dementia. So now if they're living with this, can they, if they leave the gate and they go to the restroom, can they find their way back to the gate? Would they think to even ask for help or assistance if they need it? Can they pack by themselves? Can they even manage money or credit cards? Because if they can't, that's going to be a problem. Could they get through security on their own? Could they make safe transfers if they have to go from point A to point B? And what happens if there's an unexpected landing? Will they know how to get rebooked to a different flight? And can they problem solve just if something unexpected happens? And if no to any of these comes up, then they absolutely must have a travel companion. So as I said, we have to plan and plan and plan some more. And so when people are now planning, and this is kind of, again, and I'll tell you, from a webinar I was on last week on the International Society of Travel Medicine, that they're looking really, the earliest we'll see travel open probably will be fall, depending on how these vaccines play out, and probably travel won't open and like we knew it until 2023. And so as people think about traveling, so much of what we do now, all the bookings, all the purchases are online. But again, for many folks, this isn't going to work. So I often recommend that it becomes really important to use a travel agent, and particularly for those who have some added training in servicing disabled people. And this is a time where we're not looking for the cheapest, rather we're looking for what's going to work best. So when we're visiting family, it's important to think, is there a separate bedroom, and will there be accommodation to the person's schedule? And if not, is there a hotel nearby? Or likewise, do we need to book a room for the family that's coming to us and communicate ahead of time? Again, if we're planning activities, even at home, going out for dinner might not be the best because this person is getting more confused in the evening, that we say to our family ahead of time, no, we're going to do a late lunch instead. I'm not going to talk about travel insurance. There's a lot happening in the industry because of COVID and so many people being stung by it. And this whole area is being kind of reconsidered, if you will, but trip insurance really becomes important when we're back to the travel as we knew it. Often I recommend that people do a short trip right in town, try a staycation. So let's say you think you're going to make a trip back to see the kids, or you're driving, but you're not sure how your spouse will do in a hotel. Well, try it out before you go. Just go someplace locally, see how it goes, see how eating out does, how do they sleep, how do you sleep before you even take this trip or this visit. We always want to consider, should we pre-announce something that's upcoming, because people living with dementia lose time relationships. And if we say to them, hey, we're going to go visit the kids for Thanksgiving, Well, number one, I'm not sure when Thanksgiving is. Now, you just told me that today is the 12th of November, but when is Thanksgiving again? And where are we going to go and where are we going to stay and how are we going to get there? And so now comes repetitive question and growing anxiety. So we really need to think about pre-announcing actually most upcoming events to people, because while we mean good and we think that this is exciting for a person who has lost those temporal relationships, it's really going to add stress. So, let me just say I'm going to talk hotel rooms, not cruise lines, and I will make a comment about cruises just so you're aware of what's happening in that industry. As people are booking rooms, I would definitely inquire about the room layout. Mainly what we want to try to do is simulate what the room might feel like at home. So because we tend to sleep on the same side of the bed, and where is that relative to the bathroom, because we want to use as much motor memory as possible. We want to be away from elevators. We want to think about, is there a refrigerator in case I want to keep beverages? Can I order room service, or do they have access to, Grubhub or someplace that can deliver food to the room? Those become really, really important things to think about. Cruising is out. So the CDC did lift their no cruise criteria that they had as of October 31st. If you're watching the news this morning, the first cruise went out to the Caribbean. It was a smaller exclusive ship. They tested everybody before they went out to sea on Saturday, and by Wednesday we had the first person presenting with COVID. So now they're all quarantined in their own rooms. So yes, the cruise industry has been given a green light, if you will, a cautionary green light to proceed. I will tell you, based on the conference I was on last week, the head of security for Royal Caribbean was on the call, and she said that they have put all these procedures in place, but now they're not sure what a set sail date will be, probably well into 2021. And right now, many of them are looking to do some trial cruises just to see how that goes with a limited number of passengers. So I would say for older adults right now, cruising is absolutely out. It's a wild card. It has nothing to do with the cruises. They are going above and beyond in terms of trying to clean. The problem is the ventilation systems. And if we get people into a crowded space and they're not masking, et cetera, as we know, this is a droplet illness, then we're going to create an absolute nightmare. Ideally, under better times, cruises, though, become a really lovely way for people with dementia to be able to travel. And many of them do travel that way because they go home every night to the same room. Again, there's predictability with their table in the dining room, et cetera. And there's a whole lot more to traveling that's in cruising in my book. It's important as people go places that they bring their own travel kit. A night light's really important, even if you're going to stay at your daughter's, to make sure that the area is well lighted to get to the bathroom at night. If you're staying in a hotel, there's these door alarms that can be purchased that allow you to be signaled if your loved one's walking out. In fact, we often caution about the rooms that have an added living room, because it's just another area the person with dementia can go into, and you're fast asleep as a care partner because you're exhausted, and now they get out of the hotel. Snacks and diversionary activities are really important. And then we consider these other safety measures. Is the person registered to the Safe Return program as a care partner if something happens to them, so that if first responders come, they know that there's a person with dementia that they care for. GPS devices, there's some really slick ones that are coming and that are available that can be put in the person's shoe that go to an app to the phone, so we can track them in a very discretionary sort of way. And many families have come to rely on cell phones as a way to track. The problem with the cell phone, then, unless the person has the cell phone turned on and it's fully charged, the Find My Friends isn't going to help me at all. Now, many families do this at home, where every day they take a picture of their loved one. So in the event that, let's say, they go to freshen up for the day, they're in the shower and their person walks out the front door, they could at least notify, the authorities of what the person looked like and what they were wearing. It's really important with IDs that obviously the care partner keeps all of these cards with them, that we don't give it to the person with dementia because they're much more prone to misplacing or losing these. And likewise, emergency phone numbers, do we have what we need? So let's say we're traveling and something happens that needs this person to go into urgent care. Is there a list of medical providers and should that they need to be contacted? Or likewise pharmacies if we need to clarify anything. Carrying a health history and a list of medications is always a must whenever you're going to be going out of the area, because one never knows when that's going to happen. And we all know in this business how frustrating it is when people can't tell you what kind of medications they're on or what their history is. So let's talk about the getting there. And often, with these folks, we talk about taking the quickest route because we're trying to minimize fatigue that happens. And so as we start searching for flights or whatever that is going to be, we're looking for, the quickest way to get from point A to point B. And, you all being in Northern Arizona would be an example of that. I know United now is a carrier out of there, but chances are you're going to have to fly to Dallas and then hit a connecting flight. Or would it be better to drive to Phoenix, spend the night, and then get a nonstop flight the next day, right? So all of these become part of the consideration as we think about getting from one place to another. I think I have something on airline. Yes, I'm going to come to that. This is a time where you're not shopping for the cheapest seat, but the most convenient time, and considering upgrading into at least a premium economy seat for a bit more room. I have to say the TSA has a really wonderful service that very few people are familiar with, but they have a program called TSA Cares. And if you just go to Google TSA and go to their website, you're able to either call in or send an email that alerts them that you're going to be traveling and you need added assistance. Ideally, I would do it via a call. They will take all of the necessary information, and in the major hubs, they will have a passenger support service. So a person, actually a TSA officer, will meet the person with dementia, the care partner, and will assist them through the TSA process, which is hugely, hugely important. The other thing that care partners often don't know is that if you're traveling with a person with a disability, you have the right to stay with that person at all times, that there is no reason the two of you should be separated. I would definitely declare that as I'm going through TSA. If I've not let them know 24 hours in advance, I just show up. I'd say, look, my mother has some memory problems. I really need to stay with her. And then we direct the TSA officer on how they can provide the security check. This lanyard that you see here on the slide is something new that's actually come out of the United Kingdom that is being given to people with all forms of disabilities, but particularly cognitive disabilities. And it represents that this is a person that needs more time and needs more patience. And it has been implemented at Phoenix Sky Harbor. It's been implemented in Seattle, just recently in Minneapolis. So it's a movement that's coming that once again, people can go to the Compassion Center on Sky Harbor's airport. You can register ahead of time and plan to get the lanyard at the time of travel. And once you have that lanyard, you can just use it repeatedly. The other is we have companion cards, and I'm sure you have them too, where it just is like a little business-sized card that says, I'm traveling with a person or, who has memory and thinking problems. Your patience is appreciated. These are hugely helpful, not only when you're traveling, but at home as well. Maybe somebody's getting impatient during at a restaurant, and you want to note to the server, look, my person's not being difficult. They're just, they have a condition that is creating some challenges for them. The other thing I recommend for people as they're scouting out kind of the airline side of things is that they really look at the layout of the airport. And in particular, not only am I looking for quiet spaces that they might go to get away from the commotion because it adds to fatigue and overwhelm, But the other thing that I really want people to look at is, where is the family restroom located at? Some of the biggest challenges become the bathrooms, when either the person with dementia has to go to the bathroom and then the care partner thinks, oh, I'll run at the same time, or the partner has to go and the person doesn't, and they say, wait here, the person will wander away. And this is where we get a lot of challenges in the airport. So some added airline tips, again, I would tell families, work directly with the airline. If you go to the website to try to book a ticket and find the disability section, I say good luck, and you are going to find very little on cognitive disability unless you fly Southwest. And even with that, I found it very difficult to try to put in, here's what I would need. And so I recommend calling the airline directly so you can register this person as having a disability of dementia. And that alerts the flight crew. So as things start happening at 35,000 feet, I mean, because we've become a very antsy, concerned flying group of people now, this will alert them and they'll know how to manage it. Windows are where the person with dementia should be seating, and right now with COVID, the window seat is the best place to be sitting, but all the time for the person with dementia, they should be at the window, and the partner be in the middle if they're not blocking the middle seat. Right now, still it's just Southwest and Delta that are blocking. Otherwise, they've all opened back up center seats. Now we have to have things for them to do. Again, we've got to consider pain or discomfort or even anxiety. And I often say, if you're going to use meds before or on the trip, you better try them out before you go. With road trips, it's really important to have frequent stops along the way, about every hour or so. So right now I'm saying to a lot of families, look to kind of plot and see, work with AAA, whatever that might be, to figure out where are there rest stops available. You go into a truck stop and we've got the whole restroom thing to deal with. Sometimes it's very helpful to have a same-sex companion come along just so you don't have to worry about that. Typically, you should never exceed 6 hours a day. 4 a day in the car is probably the best. And obviously, we're not going to share driving with the person who is affected. But again, for those that get on the road and they're so familiar with road trips, perhaps in the past, they think they should drive and they want to drive, and that's just going to create a problem. I often say to folks, look, if you're taking a multi-day trip back to a location, just be aware the more nights you spend in different hotels, the more confused your loved one is likely to get. And no matter how you get where you're going, just know that when you arrive, it's time for quiet. So, we tend to, as family and friends, want to join in because we're excited. We're so happy to see these folks, and yet they are fatigued, and particularly that person who is living with dementia. So this is just not the time. This is the time we just have a quiet dinner with maybe 1 or 2 other people, and then we begin our nighttime routine to tuck in. And this is where I really prepare caregivers when they're on the road and traveling. Expect that the person might say the very first night, why are we here? Who are these people anyways? And when are we going home? And partners are often kind of caught off guard on that. They think, well, we just got here. But again, the growing confusion of fatigue and forgetting time relationships are very likely to lead to this. Likewise, when people come to see you, the same thing could happen. Here, your kids just arrived and the husband is saying, and when are they going home? And we perceive this in a negative way when in fact they're just struggling with these time relationships. We obviously want to incorporate routine into the day. So it's really important to know that person's routine and honor it, as it just provides this predictability and comfort that these folks need. And it's not that we have to do it on the hour the way we do it at home, but rather we do things in the same order, because it really gives them kind of the cue of what's next. And obviously communicating to our travel companions or our guests, here's what our routine is, and this is what we need from you, really will make all the difference. Rest is just a vital component of travel and visits. We shouldn't wait to rest before the trip is over or the visit ends. We've got to rest during that. Again, fatigue, fatigue, fatigue. If we want to see behavior expressions escalate, often it's because of fatigue. And so families need to know what fatigue looks like in their person, and they need to share that fatigue with travel companion or friends and family so that when they see it, they too know how to respond. So we recommend rest periods throughout the day, just 30 minutes of maybe sitting down and quiet, putting some music on, having a glass of lemonade, maybe turning on a favorite TV show, not the news, something like Jeopardy, something non-controversial and confrontational, and just have time to relax. Naps are great, but we certainly don't want to argue about it. And the problem when people nap and they're napping in a bed, they get up, they think it's morning, and here we go again now trying to convince them that it's late afternoon and we're getting ready for dinner. If you're out and about and you have a person who demands to leave, so it's the holidays and they're just overwhelmed, too much noise from these kids who are there, right? Being kids, having a great time. Well, they're just overwhelmed. If they say it's time to go, it's time to go. We're not staying for dessert. And this is where we've got to plan ahead and really communicate to family. It's not about you. This person's having a tough time. Again, nighttime routines should be the same as they are at home. And if we're going to use medications for sleep or anxiety, again, we better have tried them before we hit the road, because some of these drugs have the opposite effect of what we want. And then finally, this warning, and you all know, being in gerontology, that we really want to avoid these properties that have diphenhydramine in them or Benadryl, because they're anticholinergic, and that's the system that's run amok in Alzheimer's. And it builds, it binds to fat, it accumulates in older adults and leads to added confusion. We've talked about flexibility, just it's needed in life, especially if you're going to be a caregiver. And you all know at the peaks, boy, your adaptability and flexibility is what helps you be successful with the residents that you care for. And so if the gathering is like right now with Thanksgiving or whatever the holiday might be upcoming, and they want to have a gathering at a time that just isn't going to work for your person, you really need to say that, or you need to figure out how you're going to accommodate the day in order for them to make that gathering. Again, if people are having a bad day, thank goodness for delivery service. This is where you order in versus going out. And it's absolutely okay to opt out of gatherings if the person is having a bad day. This is part of communicating ahead of time and not making yourself feel like you are a failure, but rather this is just the nature of a condition that sometimes is very difficult to control. Becomes really important to let others know how they can help you as a family caregiver or as a person living with dementia. Again, over and over, I just see that family and friends don't get it. They don't understand. So unless you're living with this person 24/7, or you have a really close relationship to a primary caregiver who's sharing what's happening day to day, you really don't understand the gist of it. And so it becomes really important for these family members to have very open and honest communication with others before travel or visits are going to happen. Again, they need to know what to expect. They need to understand why this routine is so important. They need to understand where this person is now with their ability to attend to a conversation. If behavioral expressions crop up, what it means, and here's how you can help. So we need to be very, very specific with folks, because otherwise they're going to miss every single time. And this is where there can be a lot of blow-ups within families and a lot of grudges that stay for a long, long time. That is so unfortunate, when what we needed to do was communicate well ahead of time. We need to teach partners as well to live in the moment, family members to live in the moment. One of the things that I've learned so well from people living with dementia is they live in the now, because that's all they can manage is the now. And in the now, they have this ability to experience amazing joy and fun and even new discovery. But often as caregivers, we're so sidetracked looking back or looking forward that we miss the same opportunity. So, as we're gathering together during this holiday period, how do we teach them to enjoy the now, just being present, seeing the joy that maybe your loved one is having as they're interacting with the grandchildren or what that might be. This is where taking pictures can be so helpful, and using this phone to now say, to look back and not say, do you remember our great trip that we just had, but rather, oh, look at all this yummy food that we had. And can you believe how big Jimmy has grown since the last time I've seen him? So we're using this as ways where we guide the discussion and we guide the joy and perspectives that the person might have. And then finally, after every trip or visit that takes place, it's time to rest. Let's face it, we are all exhausted when we're traveling places or after guests leave our home. And here's what many people don't know about dementia is that after these trips or visits end, we're going to see confusion often for maybe up to a week. And so it becomes really important not to create appointments for the week that you have returned home or after your guests have left. And this is a time where we need to have groceries delivered, mail should be delivered, we're taking extra naps, and then we're thinking through what worked well and what we might to do differently the next time, and maybe even debriefing with the kids once they get home to really talk about their insights and perspectives and what can be done differently. Now, when the person needs to stay home, it's really important that we counsel them on how to get the right respite care, that we don't pre-announce our plans for travel, and just understand that this is the way it's going to be, and not everybody's going to support you in it. But we want you to go and take full advantage and be special, be present when these special moments happen. So I think finally our role as we are trying to counsel families about travel is, do we even ask them routinely about planned or upcoming travel or visits that they might have? Or, again, because some of you are in residential or hospice care, inquiring our family members or friends coming in, and what is it we need to do to prepare them? And I realize right now with all the restrictions, we've got visitor restrictions. Do they even know how to make the visit with the person or the televisits that they're making? What advice do we recommend to them? Do we understand accessible travel and what it means, and how do we find it, and how do we get the equipment that they need? And I realize that's going to be as we gear up once again for travel, or how to deal with security and medical insurance versus travel insurance, because many people don't know that. In fact, there are advantage plans that you leave the state and you're not going to be covered. So how do we counsel folks about that? And how do we help them to create realistic expectations that travel will be different now than it was in the past? And do family and friends get what's going on? And are you up to the task? And is it time you bring a companion along to you? And then educate them about expected challenges of delays and just being overwhelmed and fatigue, and how they're going to assist with these COVID precautions, as well as crafting a plan B. So in summary, travel and visits are possible for many people, especially with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, but we have to set realistic goals. We have to be flexible, plan well in advance for successful travel, and just accept that it's going to be demanding. So this is the book that I wrote, Travel Well with Dementia. It's available both in an ebook as well as a soft cover on Amazon. And I know we're right at 4 o'clock. The time always goes very, very quickly. But with that, I'm going to stop, and I would welcome any questions, comments, insights that you might have. And you'll have to unmute yourselves.
Hey, Jan, I want to thank you. Wow, that was incredibly informative, and I can see how it can be so helpful on so many levels, not even just traveling, just in terms of learning more and having realistic expectations even about day to day. So I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you so much for all that information.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions, but I think it was very informative. And I personally get a lot of questions from family. You know, right now with them being here at the SNF, they're really not recommended to go out for outside visits and things like that. But we have the opposite, you know, family wanting to come in and visit, and we're just starting that, which is a little bit nerve-wracking, but we'll move forward because it's important for the residents. But it's really useful information because I know that families ask, and you know, maybe they've traveled, or you know, what do we do with mom or dad when they leave? We're planning to go on a trip when they get out, or you know, things like that. So I really appreciate everything that you've shared.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of questions for people to consider. And, you know, this idea of, is it essential? You know, I think it, quite honestly, it depends. If I were living with Alzheimer's disease, and it is a life-limiting condition, as we all know, and I think a year from now, I'm going to be more confused than I am now, and I really want to see these grandchildren or my siblings or whatever, you know what? I'll tell you, I'm going. Because this is where I'll take the risk. What am I going to do? Die? Yeah, I'm going to die of dementia. so I think, you know, it's that risk benefit, but we all have to carefully consider what's right. And the last thing we want to do is add more guilt to families, because they're, you know, everybody is suffering right now. And what everyone is missing is the connectedness, right? We are all longing for that. And particularly people in residential settings of all types they're suffering at a significant rate that is just excruciating for me to see happen. I think it's just cruel now what's happening. And here's the thing, this coronavirus isn't going away. We're going to have it now moving forward. And so we've got to figure out, how do we live with it, and how do we provide the right protective gear for families and residents to have some quality of life, because it's just tragic, right? What has become, and it's not our fault. It's not our fault. No one's fault, right? We're all trying to figure out this together. And I think that's the message we want to convey to families. Look, we're all trying to do our best, and you're trying to do your very best. I think we're going to have a lot of PTSD when this is all over with, on major levels for many older adults and family caregivers, right, across the board, with or without dementia. So we're going to have our hands full. So counseling skills for all of us, regardless of our professional background, will be needed. But definitely our social workers, you know, are crucial, because this is it's a tough time.
Jen, I have a question for you. In your bio, you talked about being on the forefront of the dementia-friendly community movement, and I was just curious if you could say a few brief words about that.
Yeah, thank you. So dementia-friendly communities are about creating greater understanding and support for people living with dementia and care partners. And so Tempe was the 5th city in the U.S. actually to launch this effort, because our mayor, Mark Mitchell, he's not our mayor currently, but his mother was living with dementia. And so I was with Banner Alzheimer's Institute, and so I live in Tempe. I like to think I'm in Kauai here with my backdrop, but as a nurse and a resident, I was really interested in implementing these actions. And so we are now in year 5. And so there's a whole step process. So if you go to dfamerica.org, you can learn more about dementia-friendly communities. And I know there's a group in Flagstaff that are working to see and move forward an initiative in Flagstaff for that to happen. But you form an action team, just a group of volunteers who want to work together to figure out where do we go and how do we begin to make our community more dementia friendly? So in Tempe, we started a memory cafe 5 years ago. And, you know, what's great about it was every Monday at the library. And obviously we've not met in person now since April, but we do have biweekly support programs for care partners and some virtual activities for our persons with dementia. We do a monthly lecture series. We did the Dementia Friends Education Awareness Program for all Tempe firefighters and police, because we felt like first responders really needed to, know what to do in these circumstances. We've been doing a lot of educational programs for our community, and we just held our 5th annual summit actually on Saturday, virtual summit, speaking on how to live well with dementia. So care partners and people living with dementia are part of that. We've done some things with signage and wayfinding in our library and in one of our senior centers. So I think each city kind of determines what they want to do to better identify, recognize, and support people living with dementia and their care partners. But the DF America stands for Dementia Friendly America, has tremendous tools that are available. And if you'd like, I could connect you with now the person at Banner who is heading all of that work. So just shoot me an email on them and I'll connect you with Janice Greeno, and she could give you guys more information. So, and I'm trying to think of Karen's last name, it's blocking. She's a volunteer with Northern Arizona Healthcare. But she's been very involved with the Dementia Friends and dementia friendly work, trying to move some things forward in Northern Arizona.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. Do we have other questions before we wrap up for today? Oh, let's see. It looks like, okay, I thought Sandy was saying she had a question, but she was saying goodbye.
She was saying goodbye, yeah.
All right. Jan, thank you so much. Really, it's professionals like yourself, the compassion, the time, the care, that really help inform all of us. And so super grateful for your time today and all this wonderful information. I'm excited that we have this video to put up on the website so we can access it. And thank you to everyone who joined and was available to be here. And we won't have any events in December, but we'll be starting up again in January. And thanks again, everybody.
Good to be with you all. Have a good
Take care.
afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.